I don't feel like I'm being too outside the box here when I say that. I feel like we got a dub Super Bowl. I feel like we got a dub of a halftime show. It was great. I also want the Jordans that Eminem was wearing. And then I feel like we got like really good commercials, like the Amazon one where the little Echo device is reading the dude's mind that had Scarlett Johansson in it. That was the best one by far.
Yeah, I mean, you got ScarJo and Colin Jost there. What more do you want?
Yeah, I didn't know that was the guy's name. I was solely focused on one of the two characters in that commercial. So I didn't even realize I didn't even realize there was another person in the commercial, to be completely honest with you.
I had that one in number 2. I really liked the Sopranos commercial with Meadow driving through with the Sopranos theme, going through New Jersey, and then she hugs the actor who played AJ at the end. It's great. Great to see that those two kids are still alive.
So it was just like Avengers level fan service.
Oh yeah, deal. Yeah. It's just pure Sopranos canon. Like 20 years later, it was great.
Excellent.
Do you want to form an alliance with me?
Absolutely, I do.
Welcome into another episode of The Alliance. I'm Spenser Davis here with Derek Peterson. I'm with Saturday Road. He's covers the Pac-12 for Saturday Out West. Today, we are going to be focused on one of Derek's teams, USC. Why do the computers hate USC? Specifically, when I say computers, I mean Bill Connolly's SP Plus metric for ESPN, which is used to predict all sorts of things college football related, and is pretty predictive in terms of how a team is going to do in preseason, and then is also predictive throughout the year. So let's start with this, Derek. USC is 64th in preseason SP Plus, which came out earlier this week. That I would say is far below what a USC fan's expectations are, given what they went through this offseason, getting Lincoln Riley, getting Caleb Williams, and all the other pieces that they got this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, first off, S&P Plus, I think he bets like 56% or something against the spread in season.
Which is really good.
That's a phenomenal number. Yeah. They're 64th in his preseason projections. They're behind Washington, which is kind of funny. They're behind Oregon State, UCLA, Oregon. Arizona State is number 2. And then Utah obviously is number 1. And these looked pretty similar to like the final S&P rankings of 2021. I want to say USC was like last.
They were 82nd overall.
They were below Cal. They were below Washington State. They were above Washington, though. So Washington goes above them. The big thing with USC, like the biggest difference when you talk about what are the human pollsters, like when you talk about ESPN's way too early top 25 or any of the other way too early top 25s, they factor in like hype. They factor in some of those like because like a coaching change is really hard to quantify. Hype is really hard to quantify. As much as 247 Sports tried to factor like transfer additions into the equation for like recruiting classes for the 2022 cycle, factoring transfer production into a new team is like really, really hard to quantify. And like, I think the Action Network has a returning production model. It's open source that you can go look at. They have kind of like a formula that they've built in to add like a percentage of production from transfers to the new team, because it's not going to be a situation where like Caleb Williams goes into USC and has the exact same production that he had at Oklahoma, or has the exact same season that Keaton Slovis and what's his face Jackson Dart had for USC last year. There's going to be a difference, and then there's obviously going to be a difference with Lincoln Riley. But like those kinds of things are really hard to quantify. And so like with S&P Plus, it looks at returning production, it looks at recent recruiting success, and it looks at recent history. So USC does really, really well in one of those things. Recent recruiting history. They are. I ran a 5-year weighted average in the conference for another piece that I did on my site, and they had the second best 5-year average. There are a couple of clunkers in there, but they still recruit really highly. And if you look at the 247 talent composite for last season, they were 10th nationally in terms of, blue chip prospects on their roster. The things that they don't fare well in, and let me pull these numbers up real fast, are returning production, which is a big part of it. So USC is 9th in the conference in returning production using Bill's system.
94th nationally.
Yeah, 59% overall, 59% on offense, 59% on defense. So that's 83rd most on offense and then 95th most on defense. So, I mean, you talk about they lose Drake London, they lose their leading running back, they lose, their leading tackler at linebacker. There are like key pieces across the board that they're losing. They do return quite a bit on the offensive line. And like we talked about the offensive line a week ago or whenever that was. But like just all of the incoming stuff that's in, it's just like, it's really hard to quantify that. And so I'm pretty sure Bill wrote in his thing that he is full on in wait and see mode with USC, which is where everybody should be. I think it's insane to put them in a way too early top 25, but that's what you're supposed to do with those things to some degree. If you use Bill's like S&P Plus system, if you use those projections, you can sort of reverse engineer, because of the way he displays his numbers, you can reverse engineer inferred win totals and win probabilities for upcoming games. And so I have those numbers in front of me. I'm looking at them. If you add 2.5 points to the home team for home games, then you're looking at a season where USC is favored against Rice, Washington State, Arizona, Cal, and Colorado. And that's it. They're favored in 5 games.
7.
That works out to an inferred win total of about 5.5. So if you start seeing numbers come out that put USC at 5.5, that's why. And I think maybe like the Lincoln Riley factor maybe bumps them to like 6.5. If you're talking about like what I haven't seen if Vegas has a win total out for teams yet.
No, they're not posted yet.
Maybe it's 6.5 for them. And that's purely because of the coaching change or the Caleb Williams factor or whatever. But if you just look at the models, it's hard to quantify what Caleb Williams addition means for the offense. It's hard to quantify what some of those, the skill talent guys will do for the offense, because you don't know what offense they're going to be in. I mean, you can kind of look at what Lincoln Riley did at Oklahoma, but it's going to be different at USC to some degree. And then B, you just don't know like if they're going to be the same kind of player, or specifically with the skill talent, like who's playing, like who of those guys are playing. So I think that's part of it.
I'm willing to give USC 2 full wins on top of that 5.5 for the upgrade from Clay Helton to Lincoln Riley. But if you see a win total that's 8.5, 9, I would hammer the under. I mean,
that's just Vegas trying to make money off of you.
Of public bettors, yeah. And maybe the sharps will hammer it down to, and that maybe that'll help. But I do think that win total, I'd be shocked if it was lower than 7.5. I think it'll be closer to 9 when those totals first come out, probably later this summer. But yeah, I mean, there's 6 teams on Notre Dame. Notre Dame is one of the teams. There's 6 teams on USC's schedule that are above USC right now in SP Plus rankings. Notre Dame, Utah, Arizona State, Fresno State, UCLA, and Oregon State. And then Stanford and Washington State are just a couple spots below, but pretty much toss-up games there. So there's a lot that Lincoln Riley and USC are going to have to overcome here if they're going to even challenge to win that division this year. You mentioned the recruiting earlier. The class this year is not good, 65th according to 247 Sports Composites, and then the 2020 class was 63rd nationally.
I mean,
the other
class add-in transfers, it's the 10th best class in the country.
I guess if you like you said earlier, that's hard to quantify. I mean, how much weight is Caleb Williams pulling there? And I know that, USC is not done in the transfer portal. I believe Lincoln Riley has said that, right? Yeah. I mean, they're going to keep adding to that roster as this offseason goes on. Spring won't happen for another 3 or 4 weeks here. So it's still a developing roster. And by the way, these SP Plus numbers will also be updated, in the post spring and then probably again in the preseason. But One interesting note from Bill Connolly's story, last season, of the teams that returned below 62% returning production, they fell by an average of 5.7 points in their overall SP plus rating. And as you mentioned earlier, USC right now is set to return 59%. So, I think there's a chance that they could overperform that. There are circumstances where first-year coaches get a bump, like a Josh Heupel last year at Tennessee, like a Shane Beamer at South Carolina. But it's just going to be there's a lot more obstacles here than I think most people realize with USC in 2022.
Yeah, and the question was posed: why do the numbers hate USC? I think, and that's going to get I think a lot of people are going to ask that, especially like when FPI comes out,
Yep.
And then some of those other kind of model-based performance indexes come out. I think the way that it should be phrased is that those models don't hate USC. Pollsters are too excited about USC. Because like here's why you should be down on USC for next season. USC's defense gave up 4.6 yards per run faced. They give up nearly 9 yards per pass play and a completion rate of 65%. I'm just going to read straight off of the preview that I wrote. They didn't get down the field. They didn't get off the field on third downs. They couldn't keep teams from reaching the end zone, and they couldn't keep them out of the end zone once they got there. The biggest problem with USC's defense was its inability to generate like splash plays as a defense, inability to generate chances, inability to generate tackles in the backfield. Those are things that have to get changed. And it doesn't matter how many 4-stars you compile on your offense or at wide receiver or at running back. If you can't stop the other team on defense, you're going to be in 45 to 42 shootouts all the time. And your young offense is not going to have any kind of margin for error because it will be a young offense. And I mean, we talked about the offensive line, like teams are going to try to get after them. And so you don't want to put your quarterback, your offense in a position where they're in potentially compromising situations. And so like there's real work that needs to be done with their defense. And that is one of those areas where you can look at a model like S&P Plus or a model like FPI, and that kind of like weakness, that kind of like Achilles heel is easier to quantify. And that's what kind of drags them down.
I think that's a great note to end on. Derek, thank you so much for talking about USC with me tonight. We will be back next week to break down a new team. We'll see. Maybe we'll get some hoops action in as we get closer to March. But thank you guys for hanging with us here, and y'all have a great day.